welcome back to In Spirit with Missy Reno Smith.
And I'm Vanna Smith, and in this episode we're going to be talking about dying young. Not so fun topic, but an interesting topic nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably best to just kind of start this off with the question of why do some people die younger than others?
Well, we come here with a plan,
Mm-hmm.
and some people's plans are just not meant to go on for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We're not living in chaos. There is a plan. There's a big plan. There's God's plan, and then there's our individual plans or our plans as families and things. And when somebody passes young,
Mm-hmm.
it creates a lot of learning opportunities for the people around them, the people who loved them, who knew them. And of course, sometimes people just themselves, they just didn't want to stay long. They I got something quick to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I can learn it early, and once I've learned it, I'm going to go.
Is there kind of a certain amount of time that we need to learn lessons? Because, some people die when they're only a couple months old, sometimes a few days old, hours, minutes, seconds old, So is there a certain amount of time that we do need to learn something for, the person that is, born or dying young?
It depends on the lessons that they've come, and those that pass quite young, very young, or those that don't even make it. Who are stillborn and such. It's not so much about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the people around them.
Yep.
Because there's not a whole lot that we learn, or those early days, those early months, and so sometimes it's about helping somebody else learn something.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody decides that they, feel like the loss of a child is going to help them get the lessons that they need. Another, spirit, a friend of theirs, somebody in heaven, a friend of theirs will raise their hand and be like, I'll do it.
Yep.
I'll come in. I'll be your child, and, and I'll pass when you need me to, and that. So it's, it just depends on the situation.
Yeah.
But so, we can learn a lot in a few minutes too. You come into this world and
screaming, crying, bright lights.
Yeah,
oh my God, what's happening?
Color and lights and all sorts of, it's an experience, and, we're vulnerable, and, we're learning something, so they're getting something out of it. And
do you think that there's anything we can really learn while we're, in the womb?
Yeah. Patience.
Yeah.
Patience. I tend to see souls, I describe it as they're circling the mother.
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite ready to come in, but they're almost. And then when they get to that third trimester, then I see the soul inside the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that we spend all of our time in utero.
Yep.
I think that sometimes we wait. Maybe not always.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are times where a spirit goes in earlier, I think patience is something we could learn in there. We must be pretty warm and comfortable, I think for the most part, having carried 3 children myself, I felt like you guys were pretty calm, and I must have been calm because I was born late.
Yeah. You were taking your time.
Yeah, I was like 10 months that I spent in my mom almost. So, I think it's not too bad, but there certainly were probably not very stimulated in there, But we hear things, we're feeling things, we're being rocked and swayed, and hearing the sounds of our parents' voices. So
all those fun little things. I was born early with you. I couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah, you were.
Let me out.
Yeah, all three of you were born early, and then you came in the world very fast.
Yeah, I was ready to get out of there.
Yeah,
but
very, very fast.
So we kind of circled the mother, and if were to die, say you're only a few hours old, few days old, however long, would you sort of because you'd be inside that body, that baby's body, would you know that you're going to pass?
Yeah.
So you would just be aware of it?
Yeah, you would have some awareness and understanding. I mean, when you look into a baby's eyes, I mean, a little tiny baby just born, I mean, they look so wise.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're aware. They're still aware. And slowly that awareness starts to go away, that amnesia kicks in.
So when we're first born, I never heard you talk about that before. When we're first born, we are fully aware.
Mostly, maybe not fully, but we're pretty aware. We're pretty aware.
That's pretty interesting. So you're when you have to have that first diaper change, that first time nursing, you're aware when you're born. That's interesting to me. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little bit funny too. You have to have your first diaper change and things like that when you're born and you're aware. You're just like, it's fully aware.
Yeah, and I imagine. I mean, because I can't remember that far back myself, but I would imagine it's a little scary. It could be a little scary. I mean, just that vulnerability.
Yep.
And such, but yes, I don't know. I think there's a lot to learn, even for those who just spend a very short time here, and but it's also a gift. Yeah, it's a gift to, and certainly when we're grieving a child, I mean, it doesn't feel that loss doesn't feel like a gift. Yeah, but it is a gift. It is a gift. It is their gift to us. They came in, they volunteered, they came in, and they to just be here for a very short time and then to pass, and so that we could learn. Yeah. So that someone could learn whatever it is that they want to learn. And we choose this, and sometimes that's hard for people to understand. We choose this. God's not putting this on us. God wants us to learn and grow, but in the ways that we want to. Yep. God wants us to have that freedom and such, and this is why we choose our own lessons.
So when you're young, you kind of know that you're gonna die when you're really, really young. We've established.
Really young. But sometimes we do when we're...
So how often do you think that, say someone who is maybe a teenager or a little younger or maybe even early 20s, how often do they know that they're gonna die?
Pretty often. Yeah. Pretty often, yeah. I having, the privilege to talk to so many wonderful families over the years who have lost somebody who was younger and such, and getting to hear their stories and, getting to hear all these little clues, all these little things that would happen or they would say and that would just let you know something was different. This person was different. They always seem to shine just a little brighter. Yeah. And, so there's something, just a little different about them. And they'll sometimes just say things that just sort of clue us in. Yeah. And so it happens a lot.
Do you think most of the time saying things about them dying, or just kind of other things in general, like things about family or ways things should be, or,
Probably both. Yeah. I would say both, but I think a lot of times there's a lot of foreshadowing. Yeah. There's a lot of foreshadowing. So they'll make a comment, or the day that they pass, before they leave the house, they stop and they say, I just want you to know that I really love
Yeah.
you, Mom. Just to make sure that you are fully aware that I love you. You know, something that where you stop and you're like, whoa, why? Okay, great. I love you too, baby. But like, you know, things got a little serious.
And is it in those moments that they really know, like, okay, I'm gonna die, or is it that they're maybe kind of just being told, like, through their angels, you should just say this, like they're pushing them to say that?
I think it can be both, but I think a lot of times that there is awareness, because a lot of them have told me that they were aware. They just knew that they weren't going to have a long life. And it's not that they always knew that day that they were going to pass. Sometimes they do. But it's more like just this, I'm not going to be here for long.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that everybody knows how I feel about them, and you know, and I have to try to lift everybody up that I possibly can. So this happens a lot.
Yeah.
Just a whole lot. And I see it equally with males and females. I don't see one having more awareness than the other.
Yeah.
So gender has nothing to do with that. I mention that only because we tend to associate intuition with women.
Yep.
You know, females more often, and that's really, truly, I think females are just more vocal about it. I don't think that we experience it more. We're just sometimes more vocal. So, but so I see young, you know, male spirits who were totally tuned in and aware, and that they were going to be passing as well. Again, it may not be that they knew that it would be that specific day.
Yeah.
But they, you know, have an awareness that it's coming.
Can people accidentally, like, die too young? You know, is, like, maybe it wasn't all planned out right, and they weren't able to get everything done, or just accidental overall?
That's a really tough question.
Yeah.
My main answer to that is no. Everything's planned. And, you know, there's always a backup plan.
Yeah.
You know, there's always like, if we go this way, this happens. If we go that way, that happens. So that's how things are planned out oftentimes. We sometimes have some choice. And even in our death, you know, we sometimes have choice. Are we going to go at point A, B, or C? And, you know, what happens, you know, everything, everything just fills in. If we take this route, you know, whatever could have been or whatever won't, but something else will fill in and take that space. So there, you know, there's the order, the level of planning, it is just so incredible that it's hard to even understand. You know, they're orchestrating all of this, so it doesn't matter. But that question does bring up suicide. We do have to go there with this, and
so that is often, that's one of the leading causes of death in youth, you know, teens, is suicide. So
sure. So and I have seen, most suicides that I have seen were actually planned from heaven.
Yep.
Because this is a huge lesson.
Yeah.
This is major
for them and everyone around them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, you know, so I don't typically see these as being outside of the plan. But I have seen some that were.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen some very, very young children who have passed, and they didn't commit suicide, of course. You know, I'm talking, you know, very, very young babies, toddlers that pass. But it's more like something we would say is SIDS or something, and where that wasn't in the plan.
Yeah.
But something wasn't quite right. Something was a little off and they needed a reset.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back, and then they typically then come back very quickly into another body, either in the same family or another family
Mm-hmm.
that will give them a similar experience. So I have seen some that do seem out of the plan, including, suicide later.
So off in what way? Like things weren't gonna go to plan, things just didn't feel right. How is it kind of off that they decide to opt out?
Yeah. And it's not their earthly self. When it's
Yeah.
something like SIDS, it's not their earthly self deciding this.
Mm-hmm.
It's their higher self, And then so again with suicide, there are some that I see that didn't seem planned.
So someone could be, say, they planned out a really, really long, elaborate life or whatever, but just something kind of wasn't quite right around them, or something just sort of happened that, oh, well, you can't finish this life plan, so you have to go and restart it.
Basically.
Yeah.
Basically. But I want to stress something here. Suicide is such a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
And it's a very serious topic. And if somebody is considering that, they need to go get help right now, today,
Mm-hmm.
like right now. Go get
Yeah.
help. If you are considering that, this is not the answer.
Yeah.
Because it can be planned or may not be planned. I mean, if you're, you just have to come back and do the same things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that somebody's going to force you to do that.
Yeah.
But you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to say, I didn't finish what
Yeah.
I came here to do. And so I need to go back. And so then all of the things that we've gone through that brought us to this point that has me so upset
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to go, I'm going to have to go through it all over
Yeah.
again. That's not the way.
Yeah.
You already made it this far is
Mm-hmm.
what I would want people to know. You already made it this far.
Yeah.
And there's help out there. People can help you.
And you listen to a lot of people's stories who have maybe like attempted suicide, or at one point were suicidal. They end up getting better, and then they say they don't regret getting better. They don't regret living another day. It was worth it. Because,
Yeah, it was worth it.
Well, they might have been going through a really hard time. It was worth it in the end because they get to be to a better place, in their life. So
yeah. Every challenge that we go through makes us stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're getting better and better every day.
Yeah.
And so we just have to, put a focus there but reach out and get the help
Yep.
that we need so that we can make it to that point where we
Mm-hmm.
feel that way, where we feel happy that we're still here and that. So I don't want it to sound like I'm making light of
Yeah.
that topic at all. I never would.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very serious topic, and it's not the answer.
Yeah.
It's not the answer. So.
And if you're feeling suicidal or you need to get some help, you're not doing too well, dial 988. That's the National Suicide Hotline. So
988.
988.
Okay. Yeah.
Dial that, get some help, feel better.
Yeah.
It's worth it in the end. It really is,
It is. We love you. We love everybody. God loves you.
God loves you. Yes.
You came here to live a full, wonderful life,
Mm-hmm.
and things might not seem great today, but
It can get better tomorrow.
they can. And if you get help.
Yeah.
If you get help, everybody needs help sometimes. So.
Mm-hmm.
988.
988. Yep. Very simple to dial. Nice and easy, because it used to be a long number, but now it's just, they made it easier. So 988.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. I didn't
Yeah.
even know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, so it's good to know. Good information. It was changed a few years ago. Yeah.
It is good to know. Everybody should remember that, because everybody might have to give that number out at some point.
And it's now as simple as like 911, like you think,
Right.
oh, if someone's hurt, something's happening, you call 911. Well, if it's something that's mentally, it's not a physical thing that's happening. If it's mental, then dial 988,
Yeah.
So it should be ingrained in your mind, just like 911.
And actually, we should point out too, sometimes, if you're feeling that way, we want you to call it yourself. If you if you know somebody who is threatening
Yep.
to do that, who is talking about it and threatening, and that I've had to call
Yeah.
So I've had to call for somebody, and it's important that you do that. It doesn't matter how they're going to feel about it now.
It's scary to do, but
it's scary. It was so scary. I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I had to do that.
Yeah.
So I had to help somebody who needed it.
If you don't do it, the situation could be a lot worse. You know, you could end up with someone who is dead, you know, who has committed suicide, and that's not something anyone wants. So
I would rather have the discomfort of calling and getting that help than living with
the guilt of not doing it. Yeah,
so
that would be tough.
If you know somebody too who needs help, and it's important to remember that number.
Yeah. So moving on to my next question is kind of, why is it oftentimes that people who die young are like artists and musicians? You know, there's the whole 27 Club thing and all that. Why is that common amongst artists?
Well, okay. So a lot of artists live pretty intensely.
All of the drugs and partying and
well, I mean,
partly that.
Well, sometimes,
sure,
but intensely, even a lot of creatives live very emotional, very deeply felt emotions, and ups and downs and such, and so a lot of times they plan to live hard and go home early, maybe not make it to 30 or maybe not make it to 40 or whatever, so it happens. Certainly the 27 Club is interesting. That's a little different, though. A little different than that. I mean, obviously this is part of it. But, there are only so many opportunities for fame. And so to get those opportunities, God creates these shorter stints where, where you can come in and you can learn about fame. It's very important lesson. It's a very interesting lesson.
An intense lesson.
It's a very intense lesson where everybody knows you. And but there's just not, a whole lot of opportunity for it. There's different types of fame. There's international fame. There's fame within just your own country. There's fame, within your own community. So there's different types. But most of these 27 Club people were like, national or internationally known.
Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, they were like famous of the famous,
Huge. Hugely famous, yes. And they lived pretty hard, right? I mean, they lived pretty intensely, and they lived and loved hard. I think we could all agree on that. And they just came to be here to share themselves with us for a short time. To learn some very intense lessons themselves, insanely intense, and to leave their stamp. That affects us all still, right? I mean, we still love these people.
Still fascinated by them, and people never stop listening to their music and all that stuff. It's like there's just an aura about them that kind of never dies,
Yeah, I mean, I really love Kurt Cobain.
You were a grunge kid.
I was very much into that. And I loved his music, and I felt a connection to it, to him, and to his the whole band, and so and his passing affected me. I was young. I was very young, and but it affected me, and my friend group, we all loved him. So they make this huge impression on us, and but they're living pretty tough lives. It's not easy
Yeah.
You know, when you sign up for that 27 club, I mean, it's not going to be an easy life.
Because you got to cram a lot of experience and lessons into 27 years.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think we are moving into sort of an interesting phase, though.
Yeah.
Now here, you know, we've got these influencers.
Yeah, they can be kind of like minorly famous and only for like a couple of minutes, it seems, really, and then they're back to being normal people.
Yeah. So we've got these really more people are getting the opportunity to experience a little bit of fame, and you know, in varying degrees.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting how, you know, the 27 club was a thing for a while, and you know, now maybe still you know, but
there hasn't been a new member of the 27 club in quite a while, I think. I think Kurt Cobain might have even been one of the last ones.
Well, Amy Winehouse.
Oh, well, Amy Winehouse,
I mean,
Amy
there's,
Winehouse, yeah.
I think there's a lot. I think if we really look, there'd be a lot more.
Yeah.
But they may not all have been on that level of fame. But there's more. But I do feel like I'm seeing a lot of headlines of influencers who are passing young.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not at 27. Maybe they're younger, maybe they're older.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm seeing a lot of those headlines.
I do definitely also see a lot of headlines like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and I might be a little drawn to them too. So maybe I just notice it more. Yeah. And so then it makes me think there's a pattern. You know, I don't know. I don't want to say for sure that that's a thing yet. But I think we might know soon in a few years. I mean, I think if we still continue to see these, we might have a new term even coming. So it's interesting how we're right now we are living in this sort of transition.
And is there a reason why 27 is kind of like the age chosen by God that like a lot of these artists have, you know, die at?
They're passing in their first phase. So we say 28 to 32 is typically your first phase. Some people call it return of Saturn. You know, every 28 to 30 years or so, you go through this change and that. So they're passing before they hit that. They get through the first phase and then they go. Yeah, so they get through this first phase and then they move on. So their contract only allows them to stay for one.
Just one phase. That's it. Yeah.
One big phase of life, which is not. But in those 27 years, you go through a lot of phases.
Yeah.
I mean, like baby, toddler, adolescent, teenage.
Emo phase.
I mean, you have to go through that phase.
I gotta lighten up the episode a little bit here. So emo phase too.
Yeah, you go through all those phases in that time. But so you get a lot of learning in that time period, but you don't go on to that next one. And I love that phase. I love getting clients who are right on the cusp. And I get so many clients who are just right in that spot. I love getting new clients in that spot because they're like lined up for something really exciting and special and like something's coming. And I also get a lot of people when it comes around again. So that next phase when they're turning approximately 60 and they're in their late 50s
which is pretty interesting that you get a lot of clients that are about to switch to phases, probably just because they're like feeling it, they're like, oh, something's really changing, something big's happening, gotta contact Missy.
Yes. And here's something funny though that I noticed is the young people don't articulate that to me. But the older generation does. So and a lot of them are women that I'm getting in that particular phase for some reason, and well, women are my demographic,
Yep.
and I love my male clients, but I women far outnumber them, but they're able to articulate it. They're like, I'm feeling something.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a change and such. So so these changes are, we're not, it feels kind of subtle the first time around, or we're not sort of maybe anticipating it because we haven't gone through it yet. But by the time we get to that second one, we do feel it. So it is an interesting time to leave just before you get to it. So I don't think that number is random.
Yeah, very interesting. So what should people that are grieving the loss of a person who died young, what should they know? What should they know about their loved one on the other side?
Well, I think it's important that we remember it's in the plan. I try to remind my clients that it was in the plan. This was part of their plan and your plan. You chose this too. We don't want to put it on God because then that can create a wedge between us and God. If we think God took my child, God took my baby from me, or my friend, if I'm a teenager and I lost my friend who's in school with me or something, we can think like that. We can think they were taken, and then we can have this wedge between us. And also, I don't want people to think that their loved one is vulnerable. We are all children of God, but we are not children in heaven.
We're all like 30.
Yes.
Around there,
So nobody, like your baby, your child, your young, even young adult, they're not going into heaven in this place of vulnerability. They're getting over there and they're suddenly aware of their full self and the many, many lives that they've lived. And, they're safe. They're okay. They're not, they don't need to be cared for. It just doesn't really work like that. So there's no vulnerability. So I think it's important that people remember this. And also, we grieve what isn't happening too. Like when we lose somebody young, we grieve the things that they aren't experiencing here. Like, my child didn't get to go off to college. They didn't get to go get married and do these. Well, okay, but they have done those things before in other lives, and they are doing things in heaven. They're living, they're meeting people, they're falling in love. We do things like over there. We're learning. We're growing.
They never missed out.
They're not missing out on things. They are having experiences over there, and it's unfortunate that we're not together to experience them, to celebrate them together, but they are experiencing and that. So, I guess those are things I like to stress because they seem to comfort people, knowing that it's comforting to know that my loved one isn't vulnerable. They're okay, They weren't taken from me. It was all in the plan, and they're still experiencing, and they're they're not just in this sort of state of, I don't know, like just paused. Life continues. Real life is happening for them. We're living this fake simulation life, and they're experiencing real life. So those are important things. When somebody passes, though, very young, I sometimes do, trauma release and things with my clients, and we'll sort of talk about what could have happened. Sometimes we'll sort of talk through like what their life could have been like had they have stayed. Sometimes that's helpful as well, and so people can think about that on their own. Like, well, if they would have been here, what would they have been doing? What would they have grown up to be, and all of that. Sometimes that's helpful, to think like that. And I don't know. So I enjoy doing those with people because it does seem to help.
Well, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us. And if you are feeling suicidal, please dial 988.
Yes. Oh my goodness. We definitely want everybody to get the help that they need. So 988 if you are feeling suicidal. And just remember that God loves you and I'm sending angels your way.
If you'd like to learn more about Missy Reno Smith, please visit MissyRenoSmith.com to book a reading and purchase her artwork. You can find the In Spirit Podcast on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you stream your podcasts.